I'm Julia Crane, and the day I said no to my family's empire of lies, they made me disappear. At least that was the plan. In a glass-walled boardroom high above Dallas, I shattered decades of silent loyalty and was told, cold as ice, that I was no longer one of them. They thought casting me out would end me, but some legacies don't die quietly. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories reach. Now let's go back to the moment it all exploded. The folder in my hands felt heavier than paper. It held evidence, bank transfers, property flips, forged signatures, all tied to my family's name and to mine. My hands shook just slightly as I placed it on the mahogany conference table, right between my father's gold watch and my mother's manicured fingers. "I won't be part of your scams anymore," I said, voice steady even as my heart beat like a war drum in my chest. The silence that followed was thick. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant click of a printer down the hall. Then my father, Henry Crane, CEO of Crane Property Development, beloved Dallas philanthropist and professional manipulator, leaned back in his leather chair, smirking like he'd just heard a joke he'd told himself. "You've always been emotional, Julia," he said almost fondly. "But this is just foolish." Beside him, my mother Caroline didn't look up from her phone. Her voice was sharp as ever, but her tone was flat, surgical. "You'll regret this. Do you have any idea what you're walking away from?" "I'm not walking," I said. "I'm refusing to drown with you." From the corner, Leela gave a soft laugh, the kind that made you feel like she knew something you didn't. My older sister, the family darling, always dressed like she was headed to a gala even on a Tuesday morning. She tilted her head, toying with the diamond pendant our grandmother once wore. "You think you're better than us now," she purred. "No," I said. "I just don't want to be like you." I glanced around the room. The walls were glass, but it felt like a cage. Outside, rows of junior employees pretended not to watch. No doubt this would become office legend by lunch. Henry tapped the folder with one finger. "This is a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of perfectly legal strategy. You've been reading too many ethics blogs. You had me sign off on projects I didn't even know were fronts," I snapped. "You funneled LLCs through shell buyers and dumped foreclosed homes on families with no disclosure. This isn't just business, it's criminal." He stood suddenly, too fast. The chair rolled back and hit the wall. "Then you're no longer family." Caroline finally looked at me. Her eyes were cold, gleaming like polished glass. "And don't expect us to protect you when the IRS comes knocking. Loyalty goes both ways." It was a slap without touching me, my breath caught in my throat. "I always thought we were building something," I whispered. "Turns out it was a tower of lies." Henry leaned in close. "You're a Crane by blood, but not by mind. You were never meant to lead." That hurt more than I wanted it to, but I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I reached for the folder and tucked it back under my arm. "If I'm out," I said, "I'm taking my name with me." I turned to leave, but Leela's voice stopped me. "Careful, little sister. The world out there isn't as kind as you think." I looked over my shoulder. "Neither is this room." As I stepped into the elevator, the glass doors sealed shut behind me. My reflection stared back, frightened, yes, but also free. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in years, I knew I wasn't lying to myself anymore. I pulled into my driveway and just sat there. The quiet hum of the engine filled the car, but inside me was nothing but silence. Like my body was still catching up to what had just happened. The sun had dipped low over the Dallas skyline, casting long shadows across my townhouse. My little piece of safety, bought with long hours and my own name on every line of the mortgage, until I saw the notice. It was taped neatly to the front door, bold red letters shouting what no one had the courage to say out loud. Eviction. Effective immediately. I blinked. Once. Twice. But it didn't disappear. My feet felt heavy as I stepped out of the car and walked up to the door. The paper flapped slightly in the wind. I ran my fingers over the bottom of it. Bank of Texas. Filed 2 days ago. 2 days ago, before the boardroom blow-up, before I had even decided to confront them. They knew. I ripped it off and crumpled it in my fist, but the rage I expected didn't come. Just a slow, sinking chill. Inside, everything looked the same. Throw pillows still fluffed, the faint scent of jasmine from the candle I'd left burning this morning. but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I was trespassing in a life they had quietly pulled out from under me. My phone buzzed. A text from HR. "We're sorry to inform you that your employment with Brightbyte Technologies has been terminated, effective immediately." My knees buckled slightly. Brightbyte. My job. The one thing they didn't have their hands in, or so I thought. Then I remembered. Henry had mentioned once offhandedly that he'd invested in a local tech startup through a shell company. Had laughed about how he didn't even know what they made, just that it was trendy software. Brightbyte. My hands shook as I lowered the phone. They'd cut me off at the root. My accounts. Frozen. All 3 of them. A friendly little security concern note from the bank, which just happened to be chaired by one of my father's golf buddies. I collapsed onto the couch, the eviction notice now a crumpled ball on the floor. This wasn't just punishment, this was erasure. And then the phone rang. Leela, I let it go to voicemail, but she called again and again. On the 4th try, I picked up. I don't know why. Maybe I still had a scrap of hope she'd sound human. "Wow," she said with a soft chuckle. "Didn't take long, did it?" I said nothing. "They froze your stuff already. Dad works fast." "Why are you calling?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "To be honest," she sounded almost giddy. "I just wanted to hear the moment it hit you, that you're nothing without us." Click, I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered, then blocked her number. I packed in a daze, just the essentials, jeans, chargers, my grandmother's old quilt. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay. By midnight, I was driving. Highway lights blurred past as I headed west, the city shrinking in my rear view. I had nowhere to land, no one to call. Friends. They were mostly acquaintances from work, and work was already erasing my name. I couldn't go to a hotel, not with frozen accounts. That's when I remembered her. Grandma Margaret. The only person in the Crane family who'd ever made me feel seen. She used to say, "You were born with a compass in your heart. Don't let them convince you to bury it." Her old house. It had been empty since she passed 5 years ago. Left to my parents, who never sold it, claiming it was too far out to bother with. Somewhere near Waco, down a quiet stretch of county road. It was 2 in the morning when I pulled up to the gate. The place looked forgotten, overgrown weeds, mailbox rusted, shutters hanging crooked. But the porch light still worked, flickering dimly like it had been waiting for me. I stepped inside, coughing as dust swirled up from the floor. The smell of old wood and mildew hit me like a memory. Everything was still there, doilies on the side tables, faded photographs in crooked frames. The fireplace sat cold and blackened. I found some matches in a drawer and lit it, slowly coaxing flames from dry logs. I wrapped myself in Grandma's quilt, curled up on the floor, and whispered, "Just one night." I didn't know what tomorrow held, but I knew this: they had taken everything, except the fight in me, and that was going to be enough. The wind outside wailed like it remembered everything. I lay curled in the quilt, staring at the dim flicker of the fire. The room barely held heat. Shadows danced across the cracked wallpaper. This house had not been touched in years, not truly. But it still felt more like home than anything I'd left behind. My bones ached from the hardwood floor, but I didn't move. I was afraid that if I got up, the weight of everything would hit me again. I tried to close my eyes, but sleep didn't come gently. When it did, it was shallow, filled with restless flashes, Henry's cold stare, Leela's smug voice, Caroline's silence. Faces I'd once looked to for love now haunted the edges of my dreams. And then I woke choking. Smoke. Thick, suffocating, curling through the old room like a ghost with purpose. I bolted upright, coughing hard. The fire was still burning in the hearth, but smoke was bleeding up the chimney and spilling back into the room. Panic clawed up my throat. I stumbled to the fireplace, poking at the logs, trying to smother it, then realizing it wasn't just the fireplace. There was a crackling sound overhead. Wood. Dry and groaning. Flames, the roof. I grabbed my bag, heart hammering, and looked toward the door. But smoke had thickened there too, seeping through the ceiling like a black tide. The stairs creaked above me. No, they were coming from the attic, Grandma's attic. I didn't have time to think, just to move. Up the narrow staircase I flew, hand over mouth, eyes burning. The air got tighter with each step, like it didn't want me there. But something pulled me forward. The attic door stuck at first, swollen from years of disuse. I slammed my shoulder into it until it gave way with a groan. The space was dense with dust, thick with heat. But through the smoke and shadows, I saw it. A chest. Old, iron-bound, tucked between two beams like it had been hidden, not stored. Marked only with 2 letters, JC, my initials. No, her initials, Julia Crane, Margaret Crane. We shared more than blood, maybe more than I'd ever known. I dropped to my knees and yanked it open, lungs burning. Inside, a bundle of cash, brittle yellow envelopes tied with string, and a folded piece of paper with a name scrawled in faded ink. And something else, a small metal tag no bigger than a dog's ID tag, etched with a single line. Crane Margaret, Elmwood Cemetery, plot 47B, a grave. A location. And a message she couldn't deliver in life. I stared at the contents, heart thudding wildly. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a forgotten relic. This was left here deliberately for me. Smoke curled in around me now, thicker than before. I could hear something collapse downstairs. I pressed my hand to the side of the chest, hot. The floor beneath it groaned. I had to get out. I grabbed the money, the paper, and the tag, stuffing them into my coat. The rest I'd have to leave. There was no time. The window at the far end of the attic was barely wide enough for my shoulders, but it was my only shot. As I unlatched it, smoke stung my eyes so fiercely I couldn't see. Somewhere below, I thought I heard sirens, or maybe that was just my pulse. "Grandma," I whispered, half sob, half prayer. "If you ever loved me, help me now." I climbed onto the ledge. The wind whipped at my coat, the flames roared behind me, and I jumped. The air ripped past my face like a scream. For one suspended second, the world vanished. No fire, no betrayal, no past, just falling. I didn't even have time to brace for the landing. Then impact. The wind was knocked out of me as I slammed into the soaked earth. My side hit first, then my hip, then the back of my skull thudded against the muddy grass. Everything went still. Then everything hurt. I lay there blinking up at the spinning sky, the attic window above me glowing with fire. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My brain couldn't catch up to what my body had just done. Then the pain began to thread through the shock, pulling me back. My ankle was twisted. My right wrist may be broken. My lungs burned with smoke. But I was alive. I was alive. A low groan slipped from my mouth as I rolled onto my side, coughing hard, dragging in wet, smoke-heavy breaths. The rain had come light but enough to drench me, enough to slick the grass and smear dirt into my palms. Behind me, the house roared. Flames leapt through the roof, licking the sky with greedy orange tongues. The old timbers snapped and collapsed in on themselves with a sound like bones breaking. It was gone. The house that held my grandmother's memory, gone in a single night, but not her message. I sat up slowly, wincing, and reached inside my coat. The chest's contents were still there. The cash, the paper, the tag. My fingers closed around them like lifelines. She'd meant for me to find this. The chest hadn't been stored in a closet or a basement. It had been sealed in the attic, hidden in the beams, marked with our shared initials. Left behind like a breadcrumb trail through fire and ash. I didn't believe in signs. But this wasn't coincidence. A fire truck screeched into the gravel drive, followed by a second one moments later. Their red lights painted the smoke like a warning flare. I struggled to stand, one leg shaking under me, the other barely holding weight. "Ma'am, stay right there," a firefighter shouted as he jumped from the truck. "I'm okay," I croaked, my voice torn ragged. They swarmed around me, asking questions. Was anyone else inside? Did I have burns? Did I know how the fire started? "No," I said. "No one else, it was just me." I didn't mention the fireplace, or the wind, or how fast the smoke had spread. I didn't mention the chest, the initials, or the tag in my pocket. Some things weren't for them. One EMT wrapped a blanket around me while another checked my vitals. I kept one hand tight around the folded paper in my coat, gripping it like a tether. "Lucky you jumped," someone muttered. "Attic collapse was seconds away." Lucky. That word echoed strangely in my ears. As they lifted me onto the gurney, I turned my head just once to watch the final wall fall inward, sparks shooting skyward. It looked almost beautiful, like the ending of something ancient, something heavy and cruel. And in the wreckage, I imagined my grandmother's voice. "Not all inheritances come wrapped in ribbon. Some are buried in secrets, in tests of fire." The rain intensified as the truck doors closed behind me. I didn't know what the cemetery tag meant yet, or what the paper would reveal. But I knew one thing. Margaret Crane had left something behind, and somehow I was going to find it. I hadn't been back to Elmwood Cemetery in nearly a decade. The gates creaked open under the pale morning light, the kind of light that makes everything look a little too sharp, a little too cold. I gripped the tag in my pocket, tracing the engraved plot number with my thumb like a nervous habit. 47B. The nurse had discharged me just after dawn, bruised ribs, a sprained ankle, and smoke irritation. No broken bones. No burns. The firefighter had called me lucky. I didn't feel lucky. My grandmother was gone. Her house was gone. My job, my savings, my family gone. But I had this clue. I had this one fragile thread of purpose, and I wasn't letting go. Rows of weathered tombstones stretched out like soldiers on parade. I limped slowly along the gravel path, watching for the section markers. 45-46, then I saw it. Plot 47B. The stone was simple, unpolished, but clean. Someone had been maintaining it. Margaret Alois Crane, 1939. 2018. Not all inheritances are written in ink. That line hit me harder than I expected. I knelt, ignoring the ache in my knees, and touched the cold marble. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered. I don't know what I'm doing, but I found the chest. I know you meant for me to, I don't know what comes next." The inscription stayed silent, but the words circled in my mind. Not all inheritances are written in ink. I sat back on the wet grass and stared at the headstone. The way it was phrased, it didn't sound like a poetic sentiment. It sounded like a clue, like something she wanted me to see. She used to do this. When I was little, she'd turn everything into riddles. Grocery lists, scavenger hunts, bedtime stories. Once she hid my birthday present behind the boiler and gave me a limerick to find it. What would she mean by not in ink? I pulled out the folded paper I'd taken from the chest. It was brittle, faded. A list of names, mostly scratched out. But one name remained legible at the bottom, Kensley and Bloom. It was underlined 3 times in pen. My stomach flipped. The phrase clicked into place. Not written in ink, but the ink itself. Legal ink, paperwork, documents, signatures, wills. This wasn't a metaphor, it was a map. "Kensley and Bloom," I said aloud, hearing the name on my lips. My pulse jumped. I stood too fast, wobbling slightly, but steadied myself. I took a photo of the grave, of the inscription, of the list. I didn't know where that firm was, or even if it still existed, but the name mattered. Grandma had hidden it in a graveyard for a reason. I turned back to the car, wind tugging at my coat. My grandmother had left behind more than memories. She'd left me a mission. And if Kensley and Bloom held the next piece, I was ready to knock on their door. The brass plaque on the downtown office building read exactly what I hoped. Kensley and Bloom, LLP. Tucked between a dental clinic and a frozen yogurt shop, the firm looked almost forgotten. One of those quiet corners of the city that time tiptoed around. I stared up at the name, heart hammering like it recognized something before my brain could catch up. Inside, the lobby smelled like lemon polish and old paper. A young receptionist looked up from behind her desk, offering a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. I shook my head. No, but I found something that belonged to my grandmother, Margaret Crane. I think this firm might have worked with her. The name did something. Her posture shifted. "One moment." She stood and disappeared down the hall. I waited, breath held, fingers clenched around the list I'd brought. The one with Grandma's handwriting. The one with only this firm's name left unmarked. When the receptionist returned, she was followed by a woman with graying chestnut hair and striking dark eyes. "I'm Amanda Royce," she said, extending her hand. "Senior partner here, you said Margaret Crane." I nodded and followed her into a sunlit office that smelled faintly of lavender and ink. Her bookshelf was lined with legal tomes and framed photos of children and diplomas. "She mentioned you in her estate?" Amanda asked as she took a seat behind her desk. I hesitated. "Not exactly. She left me a message. A chest, actually, hidden in her attic. It had this in it." I passed her the brittle list and the cemetery tag. Amanda studied the handwriting for a long moment. Then, without a word, she stood and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner. A key turned with a soft click. She pulled out a thin manila folder. I stopped breathing. She returned to her desk and laid it gently before her. The label was faded but legible. Emergency Executor Margaret E. Crane. Amanda looked up, voice gentle now. Margaret came to us almost 6 years ago. Said she feared her estate was being redirected by family pressure. She asked us to draw up a secondary will, one that wouldn't be found unless she felt the time was right. And it is, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Amanda opened the folder, removing 2 sheets of heavy paper and a sealed envelope. She left instructions that this file was only to be opened if someone presented this list, and only if that person was you. She slid the documents across the desk. The will was dated 3 weeks before my grandmother died. I skimmed the lines, eyes blurring as I reached the part that mattered most. All holdings and company rights originally designated under duress to Henry and Caroline Crane shall, upon the triggering of this emergency clause, transfer to Julia Crane, granddaughter and designated heir. I looked up, throat thick. She knew. Amanda nodded. She suspected coercion. Unfortunately, without proof, she had no case back then. But she wanted you to have the power to challenge it if and when you were ready. She trusted me, I whispered. She did more than that, she prepared for you. This authorizes legal action to reclaim the company, file injunctions, and even freeze contested assets while you build your case. I pressed a hand to my mouth. I wasn't alone, not really. She'd seen the storm coming, and she'd built me a shelter in secret. Amanda leaned forward, voice calm but firm. Julia, this will changes everything. With it, you have the foundation to fight back, but it won't be easy. I met her eyes. There was fire in my chest now. It hasn't been easy already. She smiled. Then you're ready. I walked out of Kensley and Bloom with the folder in my hands and a resolve I hadn't felt in days. They had stolen my home, my career, and my place at the table. But what they didn't know, the seat had always belonged to me, and now I had the papers to prove it. The Crane estate was exactly as I remembered, immaculate, intimidating, and cold. Even the gravel seemed to crunch with disdain as I walked up the long front path. I hadn't been here in months, not since I was still playing the dutiful daughter who stayed quiet during dinner and laughed at Leela's cruel little jokes. Now I was something else entirely. Amanda had offered to come with me. Let me handle the legal delivery, she said. But this part, I needed to do it myself. The butler answered. Miss Crane, tell my parents I'm not here for a visit, I said. I'm here for the truth. He hesitated, then stepped aside. I was led into the sitting room, a sprawling, velvet-drenched space designed more for status than comfort. I remembered hiding here as a kid during business dinners, peeking from behind the curtains. It used to make me feel small. Today, I sat on the edge of the cream sofa like I owned the place. Caroline entered first, as composed as ever in a cream blouse and pearls, though I noticed her eyes narrow when she saw the folder in my lap. Henry followed, posture stiff, jaw clenched. Leela trailed behind them, casually sipping from a crystal glass like this was nothing more than a bad soap opera. You've got 10 minutes, Henry said, arms crossed. Then let's not waste them, I replied. I found Grandma's real will. That froze the air. Caroline blinked slowly. Excuse me. She left an emergency file, one that proves she signed over her business, her legacy to me, and I have legal counsel ready to execute on it. Henry laughed, not loudly, just one sharp, incredulous huff. You're bluffing. I slid the document across the table. Caroline reached for it, her hand trembling just slightly. She scanned it, face paling by degrees. Where did you get this? Where she wanted me to, I said. You too pressured her to transfer the company before she passed, but she knew. And she planned. Henry snatched the will from her and read it in silence. The vein in his neck pulsed. You think this will hold up? He sneered. After everything we've built? You mean everything you've stolen? I leaned forward. Because the paper trail tells a different story now, including who the rightful heir is. Leela scoffed from her seat. You'll never win. You're naive, Julia. This isn't a fairy tale. No, I said, standing. It's a reckoning. Caroline rose too, a flicker of something fear, crossing her expression before she masked it. What is it you want? She asked, tight-lipped. I'm filing suit tomorrow, I said simply, for fraudulent transfer of assets, and I'll be asking the court to freeze Crane property development until this is resolved. You'd destroy your own family, Henry barked. I stared at him, my voice low and sure. You did that when you erased me. Leela opened her mouth, but I cut her off with a glance. Save it. The court will hear everything soon enough, including what's in the financials, the transactions, and the emails. And if you're lucky, they'll only take your money. I turned to leave, folder back in hand. Caroline didn't call after me. Leela muttered something under her breath, but Henry, he said nothing. Because for once, he didn't have control. And that was louder than any threat. As the estate doors closed behind me, the winter sun broke through the clouds for the first time all day. It didn't feel warm, but it felt right. A week after I served notice, an envelope arrived at my apartment, no return address, just my name in Caroline's delicate cursive. Inside, a single card. Let's talk like family. Dinner, Friday, 7 p.m. Love, Mom. No apology, no phone call, no acknowledgement of the will, just the word family scribbled in calligraphy, like that would undo everything they'd done. Amanda told me not to go. Mason, one of the few friends still in my corner, offered to come with me just to sit in the car and wait. They don't want peace, he warned. They want leverage. He was probably right, but I needed to look them in the eye and see what fear had made of them, so I went. Friday night, 7 p.m. sharp, I stood again in the marble foyer of the mansion I once tiptoed through like a museum. This time, I didn't flinch under the chandelier's cold glow. Caroline greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, her perfume sweet and sharp. Henry extended a hand like this was a boardroom negotiation, not the fallout of betrayal. Leela just smiled, slow and amused. "Let's eat," Caroline said, as if we hadn't declared war. The table was set with heirloom china and gold-rimmed glasses. Candles flickered low, casting long shadows across the silver. Dinner started politely. Too politely. They asked how I'd been, as if they hadn't orchestrated a full-scale erasure of my life just weeks ago. I played along, nodding, watching, observing who reached for which bottle, who glanced too quickly, who didn't eat what they served me. Dessert was a hazelnut tart, my mother's signature, she said with a smile. I remembered it was your favorite. It used to be, until college, until I developed a severe nut allergy. I pushed the plate slightly away. Actually, I can't. Oh, come on, Leela cut in. It's homemade, no preservatives, nothing weird, you'll be fine. Caroline gave me that look. The one that always said, don't be dramatic, so I took a bite, one, just one. And the fire began, it started in my throat. A tickle, then a burn, my chest tightened, mouth tingled, eyes watered. I reached for my water glass, but my hands trembled. Something's, my voice cracked. Something's wrong. Caroline stood quickly. Julia! My fork clattered to the floor. The room spun. My pulse thudded in my ears like a drumbeat of warning. Henry's voice blurred. Is she? I can't, I gasped, clutching at my throat, and then I collapsed. The last thing I heard before everything went black was Leela's voice, perfectly calm. Oops. I woke to hospital lights, the beep of machines, the rustle of nurses. The antiseptic sting of IV fluid coursing through my arm. A doctor hovered nearby. Miss Crane, you had an anaphylactic reaction. You're lucky you got here in time. I couldn't speak. My voice was raw, throat scorched. The nurse said someone called 911 immediately after I collapsed. An ambulance got there in under 10 minutes. But someone had served me nuts. Someone had handed me a plate they knew would shut my body down. Later, Leela appeared in the doorway with a bouquet too bright to be sincere. I brought flowers, she said, stepping inside. You scared the hell out of Mom. I stared at her, silent. She sat in the visitor's chair, crossing her legs. No one knew about your allergy, okay? It was just dessert. You knew, I whispered. You all knew. Her expression didn't change. Don't start imagining things, Jules. It's not a thriller movie. But I could see it now. The way her eyes flicked away, the way her smile curled at the edges like a mask melting. They hadn't invited me to make peace. They'd invited me to disappear. I hadn't even unpacked the hospital duffel bag when Mason called. The scent of antiseptic still clung to my skin, the medical tape on my arm pulling gently with every movement. I sat on the edge of my couch, wrapped in the same silence I'd been carrying since the dinner, the kind that creeps into your bones and makes everything feel like a held breath. The call screen lit up. Mason, I answered on the second ring. I've got something to tell you, he said, voice tight, no hello. Okay, I said, already bracing. I picked up your car from your parents' place. Thought I'd do something useful while you were healing. You didn't have to. No, he cut in. I did, because the second I saw it, I knew something was off. The tail lights weren't working. Brake lights were completely out. I figured maybe someone messed with a fuse, or hell, maybe it was just old wiring, but I took it to a shop just to be safe. The way he paused made my stomach knot. Mason, what is it? He exhaled like he didn't want to say it aloud. The brake lines were cut, Julia. My blood ran cold. Sliced clean, not frayed, not worn, precision work. Mechanic said it looked deliberate, like whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. I stood up slowly, vision narrowing. My hands started to shake. They wanted me to crash, I whispered. Yes, he said without hesitation. And the mechanic said with the kind of cut they made, it wouldn't have given out right away. You'd get a few miles first, enough to build speed. Then lose control. Exactly. I sank back onto the couch. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I pressed my palm over my heart, trying to calm the storm inside me, but it was no use. The realization hit harder than anything in that courtroom ever could. They didn't want to threaten me, they wanted to end me. I thought maybe the tart was just spite, I murmured. A warning, some sick way of showing me they still had power. No, Mason said gently. That was a rehearsal, the car was the finale. My eyes burned. Mason's voice dropped lower, careful but firm. You need to stop giving them the benefit of the doubt, Jules. I know they're your family, but they crossed a line. They didn't just cross it, I said, tears finally slipping. They lit it on fire and danced on the ashes. I thought of Caroline's hollow smile, the way she had watched me choke and sputter without even standing up. I thought of Leela's oops. And Henry, his silence, his absence of guilt, his refusal to see me as anything but a problem to eliminate. I'm done, I said softly. I don't care what blood says, this isn't family, this is a crime scene. Mason said nothing, but I could feel his nod over the phone. I hung up and stood in the quiet of my apartment. The same quiet I'd felt since the moment they cut me loose. But now it was different. This silence didn't feel like loss. It felt like clarity. I pulled out every document Amanda had given me. The will, the executor's instructions. I laid them across the table next to the mechanic's report Mason had just forwarded. I opened a fresh file folder, labeled it with black ink, Crane v. Crane. I wasn't scared anymore. They wanted me erased. Then they should have done a better job. There's something surreal about seeing your parents on the other side of a courtroom. They sat behind their lawyer in tailored suits and manufactured calm, as if they were attending a high-profile gala instead of a hearing that could dismantle everything they'd built on lies. Henry adjusted his cufflinks like this was just another negotiation. Caroline crossed her legs and dabbed at imaginary lint on her skirt. Only Leela couldn't quite sit still. I sat beside Amanda, folder in my lap, fingers steady. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, but now that it was real, I didn't feel fear. I felt ready. All rise, the bailiff called, and the courtroom shifted into silence. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for not tolerating theatrics, glanced over the documents Amanda had submitted. Her gaze drifted toward me. Miss Crane, is it correct that you are pursuing charges of fraudulent transfer, asset concealment, and attempted endangerment? Yes, Your Honor, I replied. And I have evidence to support each. Amanda stood, calm, focused, a shark in a silk blouse. She laid out the case, the emergency will, the forged signatures, the bank statements showing asset manipulation. Then she walked the court through the mechanic's report. And this, she said, holding up a photo, is the brake line from Julia Crane's vehicle, found to be deliberately severed. This was discovered less than 24 hours after my client suffered an anaphylactic reaction, triggered by a known allergen served at a family dinner. There were murmurs, a beat of stunned silence. Their lawyer objected. There is no proof of intent. Intent is established through pattern, Amanda replied crisply. And we have surveillance footage. My head snapped toward her. She hadn't told me that part. Amanda opened her laptop and tapped the space bar. A video clip filled the screen. It showed the Crane estate's side driveway. A man in a baseball cap, clearly Henry, bending by the back of my car. A moment passes. He stands, wipes his hands, walks inside. The timestamp, the morning before the dinner. Henry's face drained of color. Leela's mouth fell open. Caroline's hands gripped her knees so tightly her knuckles turned white. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have an explanation for this footage, Mr. Crane?" Henry's lawyer sputtered something about routine maintenance. Amanda struck again. "Then why does the same car get towed the next day with documented sabotage?" Silence. "You're destroying the family." Henry finally barked across the aisle, eyes locked on me. I stood slowly. "No," I said, voice calm, deliberate. "You did that when you tried to bury me alive." The room went still. The judge scribbled something on her notepad. Amanda sat down beside me, a quiet smile ghosting her lips. "That," she whispered, "was perfect." I watched my parents for the rest of the hearing. Not because I wanted to see them fall, but because I needed to remember they were human, and that even humans are capable of monstrous things. By the time the judge adjourned, my hands no longer shook. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a witness, a survivor. And now I was their reckoning. The verdict took 94 seconds to read, but I felt every one of them. The courtroom was silent, so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the clock above the judge's bench. My heartbeat thudded like a warning drum under my ribs. Amanda's hand rested near mine on the polished table, her pen poised but unmoving. And then came the words that unraveled everything. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Julia Crane." The breath I'd been holding slipped out. I didn't move. Couldn't. My whole body froze, not from shock, but from a strange stillness I hadn't felt since before this all began. The judge continued, her voice unwavering. "All contested assets tied to Crane Property Development are to be transferred per the valid emergency will. Immediate injunctions will be placed against Henry and Caroline Crane. The court refers matters of criminal conduct, including evidence of attempted harm and fraudulent transfers, to the district attorney's office for review." A ripple of sound moved through the gallery, whispers, gasps, one audible, "Oh my God." My mother blinked slowly, like she was reading subtitles on a foreign film. Henry didn't react. He simply stared straight ahead, jaw locked, face pale. But Leela's confidence cracked in real time. Her smirk faded. Her chin dropped slightly. She leaned toward their lawyer and whispered something urgent and low. I stood up slowly. "Court is adjourned," the judge said, her gavel falling with a finality that rang like thunder. And just like that, the war was over. Amanda turned to me, her voice low and certain. "You did it." I nodded once, but I didn't smile, not yet. As I gathered my notes and tucked the executor file under my arm, I turned one last time to the people who had once been my family. Caroline finally met my eyes. For a moment, there was something behind the mask, regret, panic, or maybe just disbelief that I'd gotten this far. Henry wouldn't look at me, and Leela looked like she wanted to scream. I leaned just slightly toward Amanda and said under my breath, "They thought I was their pawn." Amanda smiled without looking. "Turns out you were the queen." Outside, the courthouse doors opened into chaos. Reporters, photographers, onlookers packed the steps, pressing forward with questions flying in every direction. A camera flash nearly blinded me, but I kept walking, each step steadier than the last. Someone shouted, "Julia, do you plan to press charges?" Another, "What do you say to your parents tonight?" But I didn't stop until I reached the middle of the steps. There I turned toward the crowd, sunlight in my eyes, file pressed tight to my ribs. I let the silence hang for a moment. Let the city see me, not as a headline, not as a victim, but as a woman who had walked through fire and come out forged. Then I spoke. "I didn't burn that house down," I said, voice clear and strong. "But from the ashes I rose." The silence broke into a flurry of camera clicks and questions, but I was already walking down the steps, Amanda at my side. This time they didn't pull me back. This time I didn't look over my shoulder. I walked like I belonged here, because I did. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about justice. Not entirely. It was about reclamation. Of my name, of my grandmother's legacy, of myself. I had been erased, betrayed, nearly killed. And now I was everything they feared. Independent, undeniable, and completely free. 3 months after the verdict, the name Crane Property Development came down from the glass tower downtown. Not with press releases or speeches, just a quiet, early morning removal by a single crane operator and a crew in navy jumpsuits. I watched from the sidewalk below, hands in my pockets as the last steel letter, E, swung gently in the wind, untethered from its legacy. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. The new sign went up the next week. Crane Legacy Group. My grandmother's name. My vision. My way. The company hadn't just survived the scandal, it had started breathing again. Amanda had helped expedite the asset transfers, and I'd spent long days reviewing contracts, cleaning out corrupt managers, and rehiring people who'd been let go simply for asking too many questions. People like Mason, who now headed our community tech division. People like Celia, a brilliant project manager my parents once dismissed for not being a good cultural fit because she spoke her mind. I didn't want a business built on silence and fear. I wanted something real, transparent, earned. And tonight, finally, it was time to celebrate. The launch party was held on the rooftop garden of the new downtown office. String lights glowed overhead. Warm trays floated past on silver platters. Jazz played softly in the background, but no one was really listening. They were too busy talking, smiling, believing. Amanda raised her glass halfway through the night and tapped it lightly. "Before Julia takes the mic, I'd just like to say one thing," she said, voice smooth and proud. "In all my years of legal work, I've rarely seen someone walk into a storm and come out holding the reins. She's not just running this company, she's redefining it." Applause rose, genuine and warm. I stepped forward, heart thudding but steady. I wasn't nervous, not anymore. "Thank you, Amanda," I began. "And thank you to every single person here. You didn't just support me, you believed in something better. When I had nothing, you still stood beside me. And that means everything." I paused, letting my eyes sweep the crowd. Mason gave me a thumbs up from the back, next to a mural we'd commissioned in Grandma's honor, an outline of her face, her favorite quote beneath it. "Not all inheritances are written in ink." I smiled. "This company isn't about bloodlines anymore," I said. "It's about values, about the legacy we choose to leave behind and the people we choose to build it with." I raised my glass. "To chosen family, to starting over, and to never letting anyone else define your worth." Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed. For the first time in a very long time, I felt light. After the toast, I stood at the edge of the rooftop, overlooking the city. This skyline had once belonged to my father, his name plastered across billboards, glossy pamphlets, newspaper articles. Now it was mine. But not just mine. It belonged to every person whose work had been buried by greed, whose voice had been silenced, whose dreams were dismissed as naive. It belonged to people like me. And it would carry a different legacy now. One built on truth. One built on fire, forged, not consumed. One my grandmother would be proud of. The cemetery was quiet, the way it always had been. Even after all these years, the trees still bowed gently in the Texas wind, the gravel paths curved like questions, and the stone markers stood like secrets no longer whispered. I parked at the edge of the old row and walked hand in hand with my daughter, 5 years old now, stubborn as she was sweet. Her curls bounced as she skipped over roots, clutching a small bouquet of violets in her fist. "Are we visiting Grandma Margaret again?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, baby, she was very special to us." She didn't know the full story yet. One day I'd tell her, not all at once and not as a cautionary tale, but as a lesson in strength, in standing when the world tells you to sit, in rising when others try to bury you. We reached the grave, and I crouched beside the headstone, running my fingers over the carved letters. "Margaret E. Crane, not all inheritances are written in ink." I'd had the inscription redone after winning the case. Not altered, just refreshed. Clean lines, bold type, like I wanted her memory to feel present. My daughter placed the flowers down gently, then sat beside me on the grass. "She helped us?" she asked, tilting her head. I looked at the grave, at the trees behind it, at the life I now carried in one hand and built with the other. "She saved us both," I said quietly. "Long before you were born." The wind carried my words into the air like it knew. There were still days when the weight of everything snuck up on me, flashbacks to the fire, the courtroom, the taste of dessert I should never have eaten, the way my father looked at me when I told him he'd lost. But those memories didn't haunt me anymore. They reminded me of who I became, and why I would never let my daughter grow up thinking silence was safety. "I miss her," I said aloud, not just to my child but to the earth itself. My daughter leaned her head on my shoulder. I miss her too, even if I didn't meet her. You did, I whispered, kissing the top of her head. You meet someone every time you remember what they stood for. We sat in silence for a while longer. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about meetings or deadlines or press interviews. I just breathed and felt and gave myself permission to stop carrying armor. Eventually, we stood. As we turned to leave, my daughter tugged my sleeve. Mom, she asked, are we strong like her? I smiled down at her, eyes stinging. Stronger, I said, because of her. We walked back down the gravel path, sun dipping low, our shadows stretching beside each other. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I was walking toward everything she gave me. Not all inheritances are written in ink. Some are written in scars, in fire, in the quiet courage to rebuild what others tried to destroy. And now her legacy lives in me, in us, in every name etched under the Crane legacy banner, not as a monument to the past, but a promise for the future.